Is it time to dismantle some doctrines? If you don't know what that means, then come along with me. I'm Dr. Clint Haycock, a former evangelical Bible college teacher and pastor of more than 20 years. Join me as we deconstruct whatever dogmas and beliefs have held you behind, and together work to reconstruct and rebuild your authentic self.
Be welcoming back a returning guest, Rachel Bernstein. Of course, she's the host of the IndoctriNation Podcast. So welcome, Rachel, to the Dismantling Doctrine Podcast.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. It's really nice to see you again. I can't wait for our conversation.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's been a while since we talked. I think we did a collaboration episode maybe a couple of years ago where I did part on your show and you did part on mine, which was really good. So I've always enjoyed reconnecting with you for sure.
Yeah, it's always really nice. Great conversations. And I like that we just meander, go wherever we want to, which is very cool.
Yeah, it's very organic. It's about your new book. In fact, I got an email from you, I think it was a week or two ago, and you said you might be interested in this book. You're obviously promoting it. It is called Restart and Restore, a Journal for Survivors of Manipulation. And I like the subtitle. It says, Starting Over with Courage, Wisdom, and Self-Compassion. So this book, has it just come out this year?
Yeah, it just came out a few weeks ago, actually. It's hot off the press, kind of literally. So yeah, I have both here in front of me, which we can talk about. I wanted to find some cover art that was meaningful, that felt kind of gender neutral, but also I was thinking of like a bud, something coming up through the ground. And then I thought, no, it's actually not that easy. It needs to be able to look like it's breaking through concrete. Like you're having to break through something that feels impenetrable in order to grow, get better, heal. So when I found that image, then I had a cover. That was important to me to show that it's not an easy process. It's a struggle.
Absolutely. And you're talking about, okay, you say survivors of manipulation. That can mean a lot of things. But reading through the introduction on the book, it talks about those of us who have left high control religious groups or relationships with manipulators. Is that really the target audience you're looking at? People who've left high control groups, people who've left abusive relationships that were manipulative? Is that where the book is aimed?
So the thing that's interesting, I think, in the work that I do, and part of the reason that I have a podcast that has an umbrella term, indoctrination, that it doesn't necessarily come in a religious form only, but it comes in a lot of other forms, is that I want people to understand that there are millions of other people like them in the world who have been through something similar, whether it was a religious group, multi-level marketing, some of these fraudulent teen treatment places, and I put treatment in air quotes, and relationships with malignant narcissists, with controllers, manipulators of any sort. Because a lot of times the techniques are similar in how they're used and for the same effect. And so then the after effects are quite similar. Whether the after effects dovetail into belief or God, yes, it's going to happen with people who have survived different religious trauma. And other people would call me over the years and say, I wasn't in a religious group, but I heard something you said and it sounded like my childhood home. I grew up not knowing really that I could have a feeling that was my own. And if I was a good person or a bad person, and based on what and whom, and so many of the things that limit people from having a sense of self-confidence and feeling sure and feeling safe in the world, those were very similar in so many different contexts. So I wanted it to be far-reaching for that reason.
And it's not just a book, quote unquote. It is, but it's a journal. Because what I appreciated about it, every chapter, and I want to touch on some of the chapters, because just reading the titles of the chapters, thought, okay, there's some really good material here to talk to Rachel about and ask her some questions. But there's a pattern, isn't there? You've got a section to read, then you've got some things to reflect and contemplate on and do some writing. So it's an interactive book, isn't it? It's not something that you just read and put it down. You can go at your own pace, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly right. And that's really highlighted in the journal, that you can go at your own pace, and please do. So many people will, like, if I give them journaling prompts or quote unquote homework in between sessions or in between support group meetings, they might feel embarrassed that they didn't get it all done, as though I'm going to be checking. But they're so used to that kind of environment, right? Someone's with a checklist, following, nipping at their heels, that feeling. So do your own thing, do it, whenever you feel like you can. If it gets to be that it activates too much and you're about to leave for work and you got to hold it together, put it down, come back to it. And that's why it's something you definitely can do at your own pace. And yes, there's going to be a Kindle version. There is a Kindle version, but one that you can hopefully also write in. And so that's being developed at the moment. But yeah, I love that you notice that each chapter or each section has its kind of way of approaching things, and it is very similar. And so there'll be a subject heading and then some psychoeducation. What does that mean? What does that look like? And just so you understand why, if you're having this after effect, why that is. And then pages with writing prompts. And also you can change them. You can change the writing prompt. If it says something in it that feels, one word is a little bit off for my experience, it's yours. Change it, write it, cross that word out and add your own. And then also, I know that some people express themselves through art, through other means of being able to communicate their thoughts. And so you can write or you can draw. You can do it any way you want to express. But I wanted to do the psychoeducation piece in there because sometimes when people are just given a journal, they write, but they don't know how to label what they're talking about. And so it is a way to say, that's this, or that's coercion, and that's why. And so it offers a vocabulary for you to be able to express your thoughts and then add your own and see what fits for your experience.
It's huge, isn't it, to be able to put a name to the things that happen to us. And I was thinking about when you were talking earlier, it's not just about those of us who left high control religious group or cults or something like that. Because a few years ago, my oldest daughter, she got out of a relationship. It ended very badly. She was married, and it was a long story, but it got really ugly toward the end. And after I went up to where she lives in Leeds in the UK here, and I went up there to help her find a new place to live. She got kicked out of her house, and it was really traumatic, really stressful. And I spent a couple of days with her, and I said, what I'm seeing in your relationship mirrors a lot of these cultic practices. And I just went through a couple of models talking about love bombing and the way the relationship began. She was very love bombed by this other person. It was really wonderful and great, and she overlooked all the flaws and any glaring problems. And then over the couple 3 years they were together and married, her partner would put increasing controls on her and manipulate her to the point where her own personality was being suppressed and oppressed, and she was a different person really at the end of it all. I went through this whole thing, and it was just a revelation to her, going, wow, I did not see it until now. So it's not, and it had nothing to do with religion whatsoever. But I would class that as a manipulative, like you say, a narcissistic type relationship.
Oh, yeah. And part of what we see, too, in our field is that not all, but most of the groups that people are hurt within are run by people who have a narcissistic bent. So, of course, it's going to mimic a narcissistic relationship because it is. It's just larger scale. But they're going to treat people the way they treat people. They're going to feel entitled the way they feel entitled. They're going to be cruel in the way they're cruel. They're going to decide that they are the ideal. And so everyone should be like them. It's teaching, like within Scientology, you learn to not have a reaction to anything. The reactive mind is, so evil. And you go through these TRs, these training kind of regimens, rituals, where you need to rehearse being screamed at, yelled at, and insulted, and not having a reaction inside or out. And that's often how narcissists are in public. They seem impervious to anything. They're fine. But they can still be hurt, and inside they're plotting their revenge, but you would never know it. And also, I think a cult leader wants people to not react, because then they don't have to take responsibility for what they're doing wrong, because everyone seems fine. And so there's so many reasons. It's good, and I get into a little bit about this. Not only were you put through this, but let's understand why. Let's understand why that was not a gift to give you. That was not a skill set that you need in life to that degree. That was actually something that made the perpetrator in your life be able to get away with more.
Yeah, you mentioned too a term you used. You said psychoeducation. I came across that term when I was reading the introduction to the book. What exactly is that? Can you explain what that is? Because that might sound a bit triggering to somebody. Wait a minute, psychoeducation? What are you talking about, Rachel? What does that mean?
Thank you. That's such a good reminder that in our fields we have language that we use and we haven't defined it for people. Psychoeducation is, and it dovetails my two kind of careers where I'm an educator and a therapist. And I like to then teach. And psychoeducation is being able to have this educational piece about psychology, understanding the psychological mechanisms, understanding what happened. Here is the way oftentimes it plays out in certain groups. So it's an education about psychological terms, about emotional after effects. And so it's a way of really helping someone get what happened to them. And I think it's empowering to have that education. I think it's respectful to offer it. Like, here, I want you to become an expert in your own experience so that you're not walking around confused still to that degree, even though people are still sometimes left confused and they will still think, oh, how did this happen to me? But I think it's important. Part of the reason that I want people to see that they were put in this sort of well-oiled machine of manipulation is so they don't blame themselves in the same way their family might or society does. So, what's wrong with you? Like the question that's asked of people in situations that are abusive is often, why did you stay? And I think, okay, ask that question. And there are 40 reasons that are valid that they can spill out. But I think it's the wrong question and you're asking the wrong person. Don't ask the victim to have to explain with a certain amount of shame, right, about why they stayed. Wonder about the person who did this, who knowingly made them feel like it was not safe to leave or that wasn't even an option. That's where your focus should be.
It's so true, isn't it, what you said, the education piece, because for me, I came out of high control sort of fundamentalist Bible groups as a kid and growing up. I was part of it as a pastor, as a Bible college teacher. I spent my whole life promoting this ideal and everything else, only to walk away in the end. And what was the thing that got me out of it was starting to study cult psychology. So when I was studying like Hassan's bite model, Dr. Robert J. Litton's 8 markers of cults, or talking to Jan Lalich, people like that who are cult experts, and then being able to put a name, say, okay, that was what was done to me. And like you said, it's hugely empowering. I think I can go through all of Dr. Robert J. Lifton's 8 markers of cults. I've done many episodes on this, talking to ex-Jehovah's Witnesses, ex-Scientologists, ex-Christians. We compare stories, and we're like, we had that. And it's hugely empowering, I think, to be able to name that. So education is a massive piece of this, isn't it?
I think it really is. And also then you can generalize the message, meaning if you see, oh, that's a technique of control, that's a way to disarm me from being able to protect myself, then if you know what that's called and you know what it looks like, then you might be able to more quickly, more ably be able to notice it elsewhere. And you might notice it in a job. You might notice it in your next relationship. You might notice it in an organization you get involved in, multi-level marketing and whatever it is. And because I think if we just talk about what you went through and how you feel now and what can help you past the trauma or betrayal trauma or spiritual abuse, all of that is important. But you're just looking at one situation in your life. And then a lot of people will say, I found myself in yet another something, whether it is a relationship or an organization, where I lost myself again. And so the psychoeducational piece also helps people look inward without judgment, with self-compassion, where you say, okay, I seem to be repeating this. I seem to be finding myself with yet another person or situation where I don't have a say. I feel too anxious to leave. I'm supposed to be devoted. I'm there to serve. Let me take a step back and notice and not blame myself, but just have this awareness so that I can see that I need to be cautious. But I also think it's an opportunity for people to say, what is it about me that makes me feel like I have to become something else in order to be loved or in order to be accepted? Or what is it about me that is drawn to these personalities? Maybe it's my upbringing. Maybe it's my own parental system that I got used to playing that role. So it's really to understand you and to also notice where to find these things in other places so that you can say, oh, I need to be cautious because I find myself drawn to that. And so I need to step away.
How much of that relates to this issue of trauma bonding? And do you get into that in the book? Because I was thinking about that. I've done a lot of thinking about that. I've been reading a book on trauma bonding. And one thing that struck me about this book was he said that typically when you're a child, and I had religious trauma syndrome growing up as a kid because I had the fear of hell and rapture anxiety and all these horrible things that happened. And it was a very dysfunctional home. And I realized as I read through this book, he said essentially what happens is when you're a child, especially more pronounced when you're a kid, you experience trauma. And we have to cope with it. We absolutely have to come up with a way to cope with it. And oftentimes they're quite dysfunctional, but it's the best thing we can do at the time. But then as an adult, we tend to repeat the same dysfunctional responses to traumas that we did as children or young people. And I think, does that relate to what you're talking about where, because in the book he mentions those of us that get into abusive relationships again and again, or come out of one group only to get involved in another one. Does that relate to this issue of trauma bonding in any way, would you say?
I think it can, yeah. I think when people say about themselves that they are trauma bonded, it can mean different things to different people, but I think when you've been through so much and you then have a nervous system that still might need some healing, and you might then find yourself connected to people for reasons that might not be so healthy, but because that person is equally dysregulated so that you have that in common, or that person can tend to the part of you that needs healing. Either way, it is a way that you're infusing what you went through into your next relationships. And so, yeah, a lot of people who have been through things together get very bonded, which is another way to define trauma bonding. And it does happen when you've been in the trenches with someone that, you know, you're going to be bonded forever. You're going to have something that ties you in a very primal way to each other. But I think trauma bonds are these relationships that really affect healthy attachment. Because then you have anxious attachment, and then you have uneven kind of attachment, like jumping in, pulling away, because there is a part of you that is still traumatized. There's a part of you that still needs to be regulated and healed. And it's really good to look at that. I think people, though, also moving away from the trauma bond for a moment, because people will find themselves in similar situations, I think because people gravitate towards what's familiar. And they might have been raised in a household where people were very loud and they yelled and whatever else. So that might not bother them. It might bother them a lot because they have that as a trauma and they want to move away from it. But other people might not even realize that they're being yelled at, that they're being mistreated because, you know, what must be Tuesday. It was just an everyday thing. So I think that, plus also people, like the quote, better the devil than the devil you don't. Like something that's a known entity, a known kind of familiar environment can make someone feel safer, even if it's unhealthy, because they know what to expect and they know what role to play and they know how to keep themselves safe within that. and there are fewer unknowns. Even though they're not happy, they're just in a state that feels familiar.
Dysfunctional as it might be. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
my
right?
dysfunction. At least I know what's going on here.
Exactly.
It's really messed up.
Exactly. If you're going to go on some kind of mountain trail that's like close to the edge of a cliff, you're going to go on the one you've been on before that you know you lived through, not the other one that way that, is for a first time. And I think what people might not realize when they're in the midst of going along this similar path and they're choosing that one because they're familiar with it and they know how it goes and they know how it meanders and they know they survived it last time, they might not take a step back and say, but do I need to do that at all? Does life have to be that hard? Do I have to be at risk? Do I have to somehow survive something in my life in order to feel good, in order to feel like I achieved something? Maybe I can actually choose a much easier path. But sometimes people don't even realize that's an option for them.
You can rewrite your life script, as it were. We'll be right back in just a few minutes. The second half of this conversation with Rachel Bernstein is coming up. We're going to be getting into issues of things like what causes triggering, something called grounding, how to deal with those issues when you are triggered. We're going to look at some of the resources available, not just within Rachel's book, but also the companion notebook that goes along with the book. So really helpful stuff if you're coming out of a manipulative relationship, a cult, a high control religious group, anything like that. I think you will find both Rachel's book as well as the companion notebook to be really valuable resources as you seek to recover on the back end after leaving these relationships and groups behind. Now, looking down the road just a little bit, I just wanted to tell you what's coming up here in the next few episodes as we look to round out the year 2025. I can't believe it's been a year of podcasting already, but it's almost over now. We're going to have a few more episodes. We're going to take a break for Christmas and then come back in January. We're going to keep this theme going of surviving manipulation and abuse. I've got an interview that I did a while ago with author Catherine Spearing. She's written a book that's just come out in the middle of October, and it is called 1,000 Tiny Paper Cuts, The Subtle, Insidious Nature of Spiritual Abuse and Life on the Other Side. And this is a really good discussion, again, kind of going along with what Rachel and I are talking about, how to survive coming out of religion, especially in our case, in so many of our cases, evangelical fundamentalist Christianity. It's not necessarily that we deconstructed and it was one event where we said, okay, that's it, I'm done, I'm never going back, I'm not a Christian anymore. As Catherine said, it's 1,000 tiny paper cuts. It might have been years or decades of issues and problems and questions and concerns and doubts and so forth that happened to you, whereby you finally said, I've had enough, but it may be a long process. And so we're going to pick that up again, like I say, with Catherine Spearing, talking about her book, 1,000 Tiny Paper Cuts. And then after the one with Catherine, I'm going to bring you a conversation that I had with Brant Burleson. Really a fascinating story. Several years ago, he worked for the Israeli consulate out of Houston, Texas. And basically, he can now reveal basically that they were running a psyop on these big mega churches in the Southwest region. And this is just actually literally an unbelievable story. You'd think he'd have made it all up, but it's all true. So we're going to do that one with Brant Burleson. And then we're going to do a crossover episode with Nick P. of the Autistic Pod. So part 1 is going to be over on his show. And then part 2, where I interviewed him, is going to be on my show. And this was just a really good talk because I learned a lot from Nick. He's neurodivergent. He's on the spectrum. And I learned a lot from him about sort of his perspective, his point of view on life, coming from that sort of perspective. And so we had a really good conversation. So that's coming up after the one with Brant. I'm not sure if we're going to get all those in before the end of the year, but we're going to try. Now, speaking of the end of the year, we were going to have our November Dismantling Doctrine podcast Zoom call with Marissa, Burt, and Kelsey McGinnis, but we couldn't make that work. However, the good news is I have got a date set for that last call of 2025. We are going to have both of them on in December. We're going to do our final DDP Zoom call on the 7th of December, 2025 at 8 p.m. UK time. They're going to be discussing their book, The Myth of Good Christian Parenting. So again, you can gain access to that call, get a chance to talk with Marissa and Kelsey for an hour on the 7th of December. This is a great benefit that you get for being a Patreon supporter of the show.
If you want to get on that call, you can join the Dismantling Doctrine Podcast Patreon community. And I say, as always, the links to that are in the show notes, so you can find out what you get as a good benefit for being a Patreon supporter. You also get early access to every podcast about 3 days or so, 4 days before it drops to the general public. All right, let's get on back into this conversation with Rachel Bernstein. We're looking at part 2 now, talking about her book, Restart and Restore. Let's continue this deep dive into this issue of surviving manipulative cults and relationships.
What about this issue of triggering? Because you talk about that in the book, and you say that, I can't remember the exact quote, but it says something to the effect that when we're triggered, we actually physically feel it as well as emotionally, because it's like we feel unsafe in the moment, even though we know cognitively as an adult, let's say, we're not physically in danger, that potentially, but it feels like whatever happened in that past traumatic experience, we're reliving that somehow, and then we're triggered. How does that actually work? Can you talk us through that?
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of what we've learned about that is through Bessel van der Kolk, who I now feel conflicted about quoting, because he's come out with some statements that are not ones that I respect about certain ethnic groups and things that he shouldn't have said, but I'm upset that he even feels. But so I do want to give credit where it's due, though, and then moving away from him, there is this idea that trauma is stored within us on a cellular level. And I know that phrase is used a lot it's like a psychobabble term now. It's,
the body heats the store. Yeah.
But people will say, take this supplement because it'll heal you on a cellular level. No one knows what that means, but it sounds really medicinal. Good. Like whatever.
I'll buy it.
Yeah, I'll buy it.
Where
exactly.
Can I get this thing, Rachel?
Totally. But it is true with trauma, and there have been some studies that after there was a bombing in Oklahoma City here years ago that became famous or infamous, and it was very frightening. And they did a working experiment with some of the people who were called on the scene to help after the bombing, that the people who just did talk therapy, and I just do talk therapy, so, it's not like I'm putting it down, but for trauma, the people who did talk therapy were able to feel supported, were able to get help, were able to not feel alone. The people, though, who had someone with their permission holding their hand or rubbing their shoulders while they talked, or just helping them feel taken care of physically, were actually able to heal their nervous system faster, because during that's sort of right after that moment of very heightened nervous system being on alert, they really were able to have that calmed. And then that helped them not only with the talk therapy, but being able to really get help physically. There is a lot to be said for going for a massage, or even just that when someone holds your hand, if you're mourning the loss of someone and you get a really good hug, these things really matter. And they help us, and they help to really settle us. I'll sometimes know in my office here if someone has been in a car accident, because I'm on a major boulevard and I'm up many floors, so you don't hear a lot of the traffic, but I'm in an intersection right outside the building. And if someone happens to go through the light, and you hear screeching tires, like someone didn't realize it was red and they had to really slow down fast, people will wait to hear if there's a crash or if it's okay.
Yeah, as soon as the brakes screeching, you're cringing for the crash.
Cringing. And anyone does that. Right? A lot of people will say, hold on, let me see, make sure there isn't. And then they'll move on to the next. It doesn't happen every day. It's not like people are driving crazy here, but every once in a while it happens.
Sure.
As soon as, though, you hear screeching brakes or lots of honking or a crash or something, the person who has been either in a car accident themselves or has a trauma story, like a family member was in one or they witnessed it, because you can get trauma by witnessing something. You don't even have to have it be something you were a part of. They will have a physical reaction, not just the, hold on, let me wait and see. They break out into a sweat. They turn like sheet white. they'll grab on to the side of the couch, and I just have this sense they're feeling it. And so I'll say, is there something you've experienced that sound reminds you of? And they will often have a story. So yeah, it's different. The triggers are different. They go right into us, and it's hard because you feel like you're right back there, and you need to really be able to get some help if you want to move on, but the right kind of help for that.
What about this issue of grounding? Because you talk about that in the book, that's something, an aspect you can embrace, because I like what you say in that chapter on grounding. You say, leaving a high control group is an act of incredible strength, but your nervous system may not feel safe yet. Cult environments often use fear, surveillance, and punishment to condition vigilance, obedience, and self-denial. Even after you physically left, your body and mind may still be responding to the world as if danger is everywhere, as if you made the worst mistake by leaving, and as if you don't deserve safety, happiness, or even a future at all. That kind of hits a lot of them markers, doesn't it? And I was thinking about, too, it's not just the people who leave voluntarily. Some people got kicked out. Or like my daughter, she got booted out of the house. She didn't necessarily want, in air quotes, to leave, but she got kicked out. And it was only then that she realized, whoa, my God, this was really dysfunctional. So how does this work with this issue of grounding after you've left a manipulative, abusive relationship or a cult?
And so I just want to give credit also to my clients over these last 34, 35 years. So much of what is in there is from them, from what I've learned from them that they've shared with me. And I think when you're talking about grounding yourself, you're talking about finding a way to keep yourself in balance by moving some of the energy from one part of the brain to the other. There is an emotional part of your brain that is highly reactive, and that's for your survival. There's a reason we hold on to our traumas, for information, right? If we don't remember the bad things that someone did to us, right, we're not going to be able to keep ourselves safe from them or people like them or from that happening again. So we collect those things for our own survival. It's just that we can just sit in it and stay in it. So grounding techniques help people move away from the primal reactive part of the brain into the part of the brain that is having to do with language and like math skills, letters, all of the things that are unemotional, even though math was highly emotional for me because it was always a struggle. But for other people.
I hate math.
Okay, thank you. Woo, okay,
You're not the only one, Rachel. There's two of us.
I'm glad we had this little group therapy moment. Thank you, yes. But but if you can do things like the one that you hear about the most is find things in your surroundings that are all the color green, like 5 things that are green, 4 things that start with the letter M. If you like to do math and it doesn't stress you out, then imagine whatever it is math that you like. It could be that you imagine a geometric shape and you figure out the length of the sides, or you find out the x in the equation.
Pythagorean theorem.
Yeah, exactly. I think it really helps to also not only ground yourself with moving kind of the juice, the energy to another side of your brain that's unemotional, but I think it helps to literally ground yourself where you feel your feet on the ground. You are firmly planted. You are
physically
safe.
grounded. Yeah.
Hold on to something. Press your feet down. Back up against a wall if that feels safe, if that's not part of your trauma. And notice that you have something solid around you. You have ground under your feet. You have something, a wall between you and the world. Whatever helps you feel safe. But grounding techniques, though, also will work if you find some things that you can tell yourself, if you're starting to get activated, like mantras, phrases that work for you. And it really is helpful if you personalize them for yourself and to say, I am safe. I am loved. I am not back there. I will never have to deal with that again. Whatever phrases can become your go-to, because when you have them at the ready, memorized, then You are not having to feel all the emotion of saying those phrases. It's like a line in a play, right? People pretend to feel the emotion in a play. It's their 5th performance that week. Those are their lines. Find your lines that you can just have as your go-to, but that really are meaningful to you. What matters now that can help you feel and really know for a fact that you are out of a dangerous situation and you will never be back there again.
That's really great advice, because I had a thing just a week or two ago. I was really stressed at work, and I realized I was getting triggered. Because I'm a teacher by trade, so I had a lesson observation, and then I had to go get the feedback later. I had to sit there and listen to this lady pick my lesson apart and everything. And I realized it was quite triggering, because I have a really difficult group that she just happened to drop in on, and it was really nightmarish. So I'm thinking, of all the sessions you could have dropped in on, why that class? It's so difficult and disruptive and all that. And after I finished that feedback session, I went back and sat in my desk, and I thought, God, I'm really stressed out. Just describing to her why I'm so stressed out, realized I was getting triggered. And I thought, like that, I've got to calm down. I've got to go teach another class now, so I can't go in there all stressed out and upset, because that's not fair to the next group of learners. So I didn't exactly go through the things you said, but I did, I suppose, in my own way, do a little grounding thing, because I thought, I've got to get my shit together here. I can't. This is way out of control. I'm way more stressed than I should be. What's that about? So yeah, I realized that I maybe need to work on some of that for my own sort of triggering episodes I have still even now.
Yeah, and I wanted to go through also this companion notebook. But before that, there's something I wanted to share about when you're stressed out, when you're anxious, when you're filled with adrenaline, which is an important chemical in our system. It just is not our friend when we're not needing it to get out of danger, but instead we're trying to give a lecture. And we can't see the notes, everything is swimming on the page, and we're forgetting what we were going to say, or we're sitting down to take a test. We knew all the answers on the way there, and now suddenly we go blank, right?
It's gone. Yeah.
And that adrenaline does that. It also, through brain studies, it quiets and darkens the part of the brain temporarily that has to do with language and reasoning and judgment and memory. And part of that is because you need to use the energy that you have, the brain energy, for survival. How do you get out of a dangerous situation? You're going to get butterflies in your stomach because adrenaline causes more stomach acid to break down the food that you have there immediately for fuel so you can run. But if you're sitting there taking a test, you just feel nauseous.
Run, the old fight or flight, and you can't leave. You got to stay in that room and take that map.
Right, you can't leave. So there was a study done by a professor at an Ivy League college where she was trying to see what relaxation techniques help when someone is stressed, when someone's filled with adrenaline. She had the class come up with a top 3 list of things that make them most nervous. And they decided that the subject that they were going to try to tackle was public speaking. And so she tried the whole picture the audience in their underwear thing, and people were like, I actually would rather not, thank you. And my mom might be as weird. And it also doesn't really help all that much. And counting and breathing exercises also, it didn't really help all that much, because it helps a little, but she realized that you're having to move from an activated state to a non-activated state, which is a huge shift. So she decided, through brain studies and learning about how the body works, to shift anxiety into excitement. Because you're already in an excited kind of phase where your heart is racing, and you might be in a sweat, or you are doing shallow breathing, and you just shift it to another emotion. And to say, I'm excited about giving this talk because I'm going to get it over with, or whatever the reason is.
Nothing else.
Or I have things, totally, yes. The sooner you start, the sooner you finish. Or because I worked really hard to put this together, and I want people to know that I worked really hard on this.
Yeah,
or I learned a lot, and I'm excited to share it. So that actually helped a lot. And I wanted to make sure to share that with your listeners. Keeping yourself in that activated state that is too hard to shift. Don't worry about changing it. Just change the emotion associated with it, and that can help you.
I know we're getting short on time, but I'm just looking at these chapter titles and thinking, as I read through them, it really strikes me. This is obviously my own journey, but so many other people talk about grounding yourself and being triggered, unmasking manipulation, understanding coercive control. So there's that education piece, untangling the inner web, deconstructing indoctrinated beliefs. That's what I've been doing for the last 15 years. But then reclaiming your inner guide, the grief of leaving, because that's another piece to these relationships and cults, isn't it? It's, if we did choose to leave, we've lost friends, family, community, relationships that we'll probably never get back. Some of us never do. We're outcasts and all sorts of names that they can put on us that we're pariahs and everything. So there's a lot of things to work through, isn't there?
There's so many things. And yeah, I really wanted to stress the grief of leaving, because I'll tell families, if your loved one is able to come out of something, don't throw a party quite yet. They're not there.
Too soon.
Too soon. Let them have some time to get over the loss of that community, or the loss of what that was supposed to be in their lives, the loss of time that they spent there, all of it, and to help them and to normalize that. Doesn't mean they're going back. It doesn't mean you have to worry about them, but it's really natural. That a lot of people will really miss the people. They don't miss the leader often. And I'll often say that if a leader can leave, sometimes some of these organizations, they'd be great. The people are lovely.
So much.
But I decided also, when I was putting together this sort of continuation of it, this companion notebook that has more pages to write in, I wanted there to also be vignettes. I had this thought after I finished the journal, like the next day, because I was like, oh, good, now I can move on to other things. Nope, I had this other idea. Damn, I had an idea. Okay, I have to do more work. But I thought, I want people to know they're not alone, and I think it helps to hear other people share their experience. And so I just asked some people who were on the podcast, people who were clients, people who anonymously didn't mind just writing a paragraph or two about their experience that tied in with each of the subject headings, so that people could have that Me Too kind of feeling and know that their experience isn't, that they're not terminally unique and no one can relate to it. So it's been a way to, I think, honor people's experience, but also be able to really acknowledge how isolating this is. And that's why shows like yours are so vital, because then people hear you say things, or they hear your guests say things, and they realize they're not the only one. It's incredible. It sometimes saves people, keeps them alive at times, knowing they're not the only one. So it's really incredible and powerful work that you've been doing and what you've been able to provide.
It is, yeah. I got an email just the other day from a woman. I did a talk a couple of months ago for the Houston Oasis. It was on Teams, or a Zoom call, I should say. And I talked about religious trauma syndrome. So right up your street there. And at the end of it, I talked about things that you can reclaim from the trauma and from these experiences. And these are things I've worked through, because I said, just in my examples, I learned to play the drums as a Christian rock and roll star. I was playing in worship bands in church. I still know how to play the drums. So I've salvaged that. I learned how to think critically and how to write academically doing seminary. That's what I used for my podcast. I still do research. I still love to write. I know how to write a good sentence and how to write a good book because of the skills I learned in academics. And I can go through and say, okay, I've salvaged these things, as it were, from the wreckage of my past life. So if you can do that, I think that's a helpful piece, isn't it? To say, okay, let's move past. We got to deconstruct. We got to work through the grief and the rage and some of the other things. But it wasn't all uniformly bad. There are things that you can actually take away as positives too.
Right. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And people will wonder, and I don't know if you've heard this, probably have, is it okay to hold on to some things? Or is that dangerous? Do I need to get rid of it all and have a clean slate and burn it down? And it's really different for different people. If they're still triggered, if it's still too close, if it makes them feel anxious, yeah, then don't do it. Or wait, pick up the drums maybe a year later, 2 years later, maybe not right away, until you really can reclaim those things as your own. And they're not tied to another place. They're really your skill, your talent, your hard work, your practice. And to have it really be something you can take credit for, which can feel really nice.
That's a huge piece, isn't it? All right, I need to let you go because we are running up against our time limit. So your book, again, is called Restart and Restore, a Journal for Survivors of Manipulation, Starting Over with Courage, Wisdom, and Self-Compassion by Rachel Bernstein. Where can people find the book? And then also, how can people get a hold of you? Because obviously we mentioned the IndoctriNation Podcast. That's a helpful resource. Where can people find you on social media?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I can give you all the links if you want to put them in the show notes. And
Sure.
And on kind of everywhere, on Facebook and Instagram, TikTok. And definitely check out the show. It's on streaming channels, wherever you like to listen. And if you also have a story and you want it to be told, be in touch with me and come on the show. The books, the companion notebook and the journal and the journal itself are available on Amazon. And there's also a link on my website, rachelbernsteintherapy.com. So that can make it easy for people to find it there. But I really appreciate this opportunity to get the word out and to talk it through with you about what is offered in these publications. I'm happy about it. And again, give credit to so many people who have been open and shared their stories about what they needed and what worked and what didn't over the years. And that's invaluable information. And thank you to you for all the work that you do.
Yeah, anytime. I love what you said. We're not alone in this thing. There are thousands, millions of us. We're not crazy. And that's, like you say, it's so isolating, but finding groups to plug in on Facebook and other social media platforms, whatever group you came out of or relationship you came out of, they are hugely supportive. So yeah, that's another helpful piece, isn't it? But thank you so much, Rachel. Let's keep in touch. This sounds like a great resource, actually. Thank you so much for writing the book and for spending a bit of time talking to me.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity. Always good to see you.